First, starting with a short breathing meditation, watching your breath mindfully. So then we can think as long as we are in samsara, as long as our life is driven by our karma and the delusions, there's always going to be some problems, difficulties, challenges, suffering. And the only way to free ourselves completely and permanently from all the conflict, problems, suffering is by overcoming our own karma, our own actions. And to do that, we need to eliminate the very cause of those afflicting, the cause of the afflicting emotion, which are the cause of our karma. And to overcome all the defilement or afflicting emotion, not just one of them, but all of them, and completely from the very root of it, we need to overcome the ignorance. For that, we need to develop a special insight, the wisdom, realizing the ultimate truth or emptiness or selflessness. And for that, we need to reflect, contemplate, meditate. And continue to study. Create the conducive conditions by accumulating merit and purify the obstacles. And for that very reason, that's why we have come here together to learn by discussing and to have imprint in our mind stream And may it become cause and conditions, not only for our own individual freedom, but in order to liberate all sentient beings from all the samsara and cause of samsara. May it become cause and condition to achieve fully enlightenment. May I be able to achieve fully enlightenment as soon as possible. And I'm going to try as much as possible to achieve that enlightenment. Okay. I prostrate to the Arya Jam. Thus did I hear at one time that Bhagavan was rolling on the massive vultures mountain in Rajgriha together with the great community of monks and the great community of Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was observed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perceptions. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of profound perfection and wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection and wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of lineage who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection and wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, no division, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no order, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, the Bodhisattva rely on dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in 30 times also manifestly completely awaken to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in relying on perfection and wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection and wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that truly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth since it is not false. The mantra of perfection and wisdom declared, Tayata Om Gade Gade Paragade Parasam Gade Bodhe Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commanded the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that, it is like that. One should practice a profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharitiri Putras, the Bodhisattva Mahasatva Aryavalokeshwara, and those surrounding the entirety along the worlds of God, human, Asura, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken the Bhagavan. Sashipege Choshimeto Tarirale Yede Yembade Sangye Shindo Mide Uwa Yogun Namadashin Chöpajo Edam Gururana Mandala Gandhiyatayami. I call for refuge until I am enlightened. To the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, by the merit I create through this Nirvana Dharma, may I become Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye Choda Toge Chonam La Chanchu Padu Dane Taki Shosheki Vesonam Lola Penche Sangye Dupa Sangye Choda Toge Chonam Chanchu Padu Taki Shosheki Vesonam Lola Penche Sangye Dupa. So last week we went through, identifying the very root of the root of the samsara, and that's the self-grasping ignorance. And so the both yeah. So I think and within the self-grasping ignorance, there is as is mentioned, there is a innate self-grasping ignorance, and there is intellectually acquired through reasoning and logic and so forth. And within that, two of those self-grasping ignorance, the innate self-grasping ignorance is the very root of samsara, and not the intellectually acquired by tenets, reasoning, logic. That is not the very root of the all the samsara, because that kind of ignorance is not possessed by all sentient beings. And so yeah, I think we kind of went through that. I guess maybe did we finish on page number 230? That's what I feel like. 230 and
230. I thought you were on 230. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think maybe we're 230 where it said the very first paragraph where therefore the both of them should be understood as ignorance. I think maybe that was where it seems like that.
Where you finished. Yes, thank you, Geshe-la.
Yeah. So again, the next is saying, both Nagarjuna, the father, and the son, Aryadeva, both of them, even though they both are ignorant, and even though they both are making, even though both they, both of them, maybe let me start. Even though both Nagarjuna and his son, spiritual son, Aryadeva, both of them assert that both the innate ignorance and intellectually acquired ignorance, even though both of them are mistaken and both of them are ignorance, but the very root of the samsara or cyclic existence is that innate one. And for example, just as the body, among the five senses, the body sense is the basis for the other senses. The body sense is the very root of other senses. If there's no body, then there's no eye sense, there's no ear sense, no nose sense, no taste sense. And so body is the very kind of the root or the basis of that. And similarly, that ignorance is the very root of all the delusions and the samsara, and so ignorance is the chief. Ignorance is the very root. Ignorance is the very fundamental cause of the samsara and of all the delusions. So yeah, just as those other senses, the other four senses, without the body, the other four senses cannot exist independently by themselves. So they depend on the body sense. Same way, all other delusions cannot function or manifest or arise independently without depending on the ignorance. And so therefore, the ignorance is the very root. And so that so then Aryadevas, on 400 stanzas, as it says, how the ignorance, due to ignorance, or how other delusions arises, So first there's the ignorance. That superimpose or that project the object to be inherently existence or truly existence. So that is what the ignorance does. The ignorance project or superimpose these qualities of truly or inherently existing to the object which is not there, but the ignorance kind of project there. On the basis of projecting by that ignorance, superimposing projecting truly or inherently existing on the objects, on the basis of that, then there is appearance of real beautiful or attractive objects, some of object appearing that way. And due to that, then there is attachment arising. And then when, due to that ignorance, projecting, there is a real, unattractive or bad objects. On the basis of that, then, repulsions or aversions or anger arises. And so that is how, due to that fundamental ignorance, then that is how attachment, anger arises. And then, due to that, then due to that anger and attachment, then many other delusions arises. And also then we create negative karma and contaminated karma. And then we continue to take rebirth in samsara, and we continue to experience sufferings. This one, there it says in that, at the end of that commentaries of the 400 stanza, they said, therefore they operate in a manner that is not different from the ignorance, and even depend on it for ignorance achieved. So we discuss about how all the delusions depend on that ignorance, how the delusions, such as anger, attachment, arises from the ignorance, therefore how it depends on them, therefore how that ignorance is achieved, or the root. But therefore they operate in a manner that is not different from ignorance. That statement might be explaining a uniqueness of prasangika views. And unlike like some others Buddhist schools, so in prasangika point of view, there could be attachment and anger, a very subtle attachment and very subtle ignorance that is part of fundamental ignorance itself. When you said not different from the ignorance, normally there is the ignorance, and then from the ignorance, attachment, anger arises, and they are different from the ignorance. But this statement saying that, operate in a manner that is not different from the ignorance, meaning, there is the gross level of the delusions, such as anger, attachment, arise from the fundamental ignorance. But there could be a subtle, very subtle attachment and anger that function together with the ignorance simultaneously. Okay, so grasping the objects, not only in an attractive way or unattractive way, but also grasping that as an inherently existence. And so the difference will be, that attachment and that subtle attachment and the subtle anger that is together with that ignorance simultaneously at that same time, even though they grasp the object truly existing, but they grasp it by the power of the ignorance, not by independently by themselves. And so that is slightly different from the ignorance itself. Ignorance is grasping by itself, by its own power, without depending on other mental factors, by itself. But whereas that subtle attachment and subtle ignorance that is together with the ignorance simultaneously, those, even though they grasp the object truly or inherently, but it is not known as ignorance, even though the way they grasp the object is same, the way they apprehend the object same, in the sense that they all apprehend inherently, but because it is apprehending by the power of the ignorance. So So I think maybe that might be here, that might be Lama Tsongkhapa making a slightly special uniqueness of Prasangika in terms of the subtle delusions, subtle anger and attachment. Oh, what happened? Okay, so I think, yeah, so anyway, that is that. So then Lama Tsongkhapa kind of so again, there is whenever there is appearance of the objects, whatever object that is, there is appearance of the objects. And when we have appearance of objects, there's appearance of objects existing by its own side, from its own side, by its own entity, by its own power. And not only there is appearance of that, then our ignorance, grasps or apprehend the way it appeared to that way. And so when there is an appearance of beautiful objects existing as a beautiful from its own side, from its own, by its own power as a beautiful, then we believe that there is a beautiness from its own objective side. On the basis of that, then attachment arises. And on the other hand, whenever object appears as something, ugly, unattractive, harmful, not beneficial, whatever, not only there's appearance, the object appeared to exist that way from its own side, objectively from its own side. And not only there is appearance of that objectively or truly existing as that kind of quality from its own side, then again our ignorance grabs, apprehend that way, and on the basis of that, then aversion, anger arises, and then there is saying, Lama Tsongkhapa said, when things do not appear either as attractive or neither as a non-attractive, or when thing does not appear, whether it is agreeable our mind or not agreeable our mind, but more like a neutral, more like neutral. Sometimes the object appear nice, beautiful, attractive, agreeable our mind. Sometimes the object appear, not nice, bad, unattractive, unpleasant. And sometimes there is an object which doesn't appear neither as attractive, non-attractive, neither good or neither bad, more kind of neutral. And when that appears, even though there is appearance of that object in terms of quality, more as a neutral, neither pleasant or unpleasant, but more neutral. Even that, there is appearance of that as that quality being a kind of neither attractive and neither non-attractive from its own side, by its own objective side and real. And so then there is not only there's appearance, then we also grasp that way. And when we cling and grasp that, then what it gives is it gives rise to the continuity of the ignorance. When there is appearance and grasping of attractive, it leads to attachment. When there is appearance and grasping or non-attractive from its own objective side or truly existing, it leads to anger or aversions. And when there is appearance and grasping of the objects as neither pleasant or neither unpleasant but neutral, but existing from its own side, then that gives rise to continuity of the ignorance. It gives to another rising or another continuity of ignorance. So thereby, basically, it gives rise to any of those delusions. Either ignorance, attachment, or anger. So that is where, I think that is where Lama Tsongkhapa says at the end of that, where he says, if the object does not appear either to anger or disagree with one's mind and remain as ordinary things in between, like neutral, neither of others two arises. So attachment and anger, that is what it means, neither of them. When the object is observed, but further ignorance of the same kind arises. Okay, so I think that is where Lam Tsongkhapa's. So again, we have to understand that, So basically, it gives to one of those three root delusion or poisonous delusion arises. And so also in 60 stanza of reasoning by Nagarjuna, it also says same, as long as we have the ignorance as the basis, from that ignorance, then, the great venom of afflicting emotions such as anger, attachment, ignorance, similar ignorance will arise, even in the ordinary states, it is seized by the snake of mental afflictions. It could mean, like when it is say it is even in ordinary states, sometimes even we are not really angry, neither we have attachment, but it seems our mind is more calm. Even in those states, it gives rise to the ignorance, as long as we have the ignorance that give rise to the arising or similar state of mind, that is ignorance, So basically, one of the afflicting emotions is arising, overtaken by that. So when we really understand that, is a kind of a little bit scary, Normally we feel when we are in strong anger, emotional anger or attachment, we feel like, oh, that's bad. But when we don't have that, sometimes we feel like it's okay, when we are not in state of anger, when we are not in state of attachment. And it seems like, but actually, as long as we have that fundamental ignorance, it continues to give rise to that similar ignorance, same kind of ignorance again and again, even when we don't have it. And basically is producing one of those delusions all the time. It's kind of scary in a way. But at the same time, when we understand that, then it really makes us to the importance of realizing the emptiness of selflessness, how important it is, how crucial it is. Because that is the only way to free from that stages is by having a correct understanding or realization of emptiness or selflessness, And so, so there as next, Lama Tsongkhapa says, the view of transitory collections, we already spoke about that before, arise from apprehending aggregate as truly existing, appear to be the intended meaning of precious garland as well. So what it means is, for example, when we think of self, because the view of transitory collections is, as we mentioned before, is ignorance, that's grasping the self or mind to be inherently existing or truly existence. Okay, and that the sense of the view of transitory view of mind arises from the transitory view of the self. Okay, first there is sense of self, and then on the basis of that, then sense of mind. So here, when you say the view of transitory collection arises from apprehending the aggregate as truly existent, it feels like it is the other way around, isn't it? Normally we feel, so can you see? It seems like a little bit it is the other way around. First, there is the, but again, when we have the sense of self, when we think of self, what appears to us first? In our mind, our aggregate. First either I see my body and then I start to, oh, me. First I see my body and then I say, oh, me. Or sometimes, my feeling. First there is a sense of feeling. My feeling is not good today. And then say, oh, I'm not feeling well today. Or sometimes maybe we see our state of mind, the mind is not stable today. And then you think, oh, I'm not stable today. So one of those aggregates first appear. On the basis of those aggregates, then there's sense of self arising. And so first there is a appearance of our aggregates, either all of them or one of those aggregates. And the moment we have that appearance of aggregate, there's not only there is appearance of aggregate, there is appearance of aggregate as truly existence. And not really there is appearance of aggregate truly existence, then that very moment our ignorance apprehend the aggregate to be truly existence. And on the basis of, so that is where here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, so first there is a sense of appearance of aggregate, and on the basis of that, there is appearance of the self. In the same way, there is first there is the ignorance that is apprehending the aggregate to be truly existing. On the basis of that, then there is the sense of ignorance that apprehend the self to be truly existence. And so that is where Lama. So, and this again will come also later as well, Then in Chandrakirti's compendium to the violet cognitions, first we see as a self, and to that then we kind of apprehend and see it as a me or I on that. And then due to that, then there is first there is a sense of truly inherently existent self. On the basis of that, then we get attached to that self. We get attached to that self. So we get attached to that self. So being attached to that self, then we get to the attachment to the happiness of the self. Then we get attachment to the happiness of the self. On the base, once you get attached to the self, then we get attached to the happiness of the self. you know. And due to being attachment to the happiness of the self, then our mind gets kind of obscure and cannot see the reality, you know. And also due to that, you know, then we get attached to any object that we believe that will give us happiness. Then we get attached to all the objects that we think or believe that will give happiness to the self. So therefore, then we're, you know, attached to because I think maybe this water will give me happiness. So then when I become attached to the water, because we think that food or this and that will give happiness to me, and so then we get attached to that. And then whatever we think, you know, so then that is how we get attached to the mind, you know, and those from the attachment to the self, then there is attachment to the, you know, my happiness and all the object that will give me happiness. And therefore and then we get attached to all of that, you know. And then whenever we feel or we think any object is going to be an obstacle for our happiness, then we develop aversions and dislike and anger. Any object that we feel is going to be it will create obstacles, hindrance to our happiness, then towards that, then we get aversion, dislike, and anger. And so that is how all the delusion arises. You know, so therefore, as long as there is a attachment to the self, then all other attachment arises. As long as there is attachment to the self, then attachment to our happiness of the self and others will arise. And as long as it's there, then we will continue to take rebirth in samsara, cycle existing, and we will continue to experience suffering. And so that is the, as it is said there. And similarly, Nagarjuna's 70 stanza on emptiness, as it says, you know, due to the afflictive emotions, you know, then actions or karma arises, you know. So the afflictive emotions is the cause of the root of the karma, you know. So therefore karma arises or derives from the afflictive emotions, you know. And the afflictive emotions arises from that fundamental ignorance. And due to the karma as a cause, then it gives rise to this samsaric birth or samsaric body, you know, samsaric rebirth with a samsaric body. And then due to this samsaric rebirth of body, then we continue to experience suffering. As long as we have samsaric body or samsaric rebirth, then we will have a, as a human beings, we will continue to have a, you know, sickness, aging, death, all of that. So basically it's saying, due to that our fundamental ignorance, then delusions such as attachments arises. Due to the attachment, then we create such as attachments, delusion, then we create karma. And due to the karma or the actions, then we take rebirth in samsara. And then having taken rebirth in samsara, then we continue to experience all the suffering within the samsara. So again, all of them coming and arising from that fundamental ignorance of self-grasping. So that is where, and those three are empty of entity, and so, but all, whether it's the afflictive emotion, whether it's the karma, whether it's the result of the karma, the samsara rebirth, all of them, even though they all are empty of truly existing or inherent existence, and even they all are, the true nature of them is they all are empty of inherently or truly existence. So then, so if you want to overcome that fundamental ignorance, that apprehend the self to be truly existent or inherently existent, then we need to have a correct realization of emptiness or selflessness. And so that is where we should seek the view of selflessness. So that is where it is. And that, like, there is one wishing to abandon the apprehension of self should seek the view of selflessness. And then there is two. And why we need to seek the view realizing selflessness, and how to generate the view realizing selflessness, and basically why we need to have realization of emptiness and how to have correct realization of emptiness. And so that's what it is going to be explaining. So here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, as we have studied up to here, as we have studied, we realize how this ignorance is the very root of all the delusions. Starting from the scripture, and then applying on our own experience, and observing our own experience, how does anger arises, how the attachment arises, and through our own observations or our own experience, then with the help of the scriptures, explanations, then we realize, we understand, yes, indeed, all these delusions, all these negative emotions, defilements, does comes and arise from that ignorance. Once we have that understanding, then of course we have the we have the wish or desire to overcome and abandon that ignorance. While we have that wish and aspirations and understanding of need to overcome that ignorance, but if we don't really seek and put effort to understand the view of selflessness, the view of emptiness, then Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, is kind of is like a stupid, it's because without having the realization of emptiness, you cannot overcome that. If you want to overcome that, if you want to eliminate that, then you need to develop the view of selflessness or emptiness, because that is the only way that can help us to overcome that delusion. The wisdom realizing the emptiness is the only way that can overcome that. And so that is where next one, that is where it comes. Mm. And then once we have certain understanding and inspiration to realize the view of selflessness, emptiness, but then not putting effort to do that, again, by starting learning and by using reasoning and logics in order to have a more understanding, deeper understanding, more profound understanding, is saying within our mental continuum is it's like a dull faculty, like a or like lose. That means we have lost the vital essence of the teachings, the path that lead to liberation and omniscience. So I think that is. So then, in order to overcome that ignorance, the importance is to abandon the way the mind that ignorance apprehend the objects, by overcoming the way the ignorance apprehend. And so, in terms of the scriptures, as the Makiti says, without those objects being negated, so here the object meaning, the object of the ignorance, the object of apprehending objects, the apprehending objects is truly existing. The apprehending object of the ignorance is that truly existing or inherently existing. So without overcoming or negating that object, the truly existence of the object, then one cannot possibly abandon the ignorance itself, And without abandoning the ignorance, then we cannot ignorance hatred and attachment, desire, and other delusions. That is, that is related to, in terms of the hatred, it comes through by seeing the objects, faultiness in objects from its own side, and attachment arising by seeing the excellent qualities in the object from its own side, or real excellent qualities. So it's done, the way to abandon that is done by not seeing those in objects. So that means not seeing truly existence, faulty quality in the object, by seeing not truly existing excellent quality in the objects. So that is how, because the ignorance sees, inherently existing faulty in terms of anger, in terms of attachment, inherently existing excellent qualities in objects. And so the way to overcome is by overcoming, by not seeing inherently existing faulty inequalities and not inherently existing excellent qualities. And that is the only way, and not through some external approach. And so then it says, and Lama Tsongkhapa explained that, for example, when you are being in external object, when you are pricked by a thorn, you take the thorn away, you pull it, and that is how you abandon the pain, by pulling it and the thorn. So here, when we try to overcome the ignorance and the delusions, it cannot be kind of taken away by externally like that we take about the thorn, but instead we have to overcome the way the ignorance apprehend the objects, so in another way is say, like, we hear or we see some news, and we believe that is the truth. On the basis of that, then maybe many emotion arises, depending on what kind of news that you heard, or maybe fear could arise. Maybe frustration or anger could arise. In some cases, attachment could arise. So depending on, so what do you see? And we have all these different experiences, whether it's a fear, whether it's a worry, whether it's an attachment, whether it's an anger, on the basis of believing what the news that you saw or you heard. And even that news you saw or heard is totally wrong, mistaken, fake, but we believe that was the truth. On the basis of believing that is the truth, then all this emotion arises. And the way to overcome those emotions is to overcome the belief that this is the truth. And by exposing this is not truth, it's not a truth. The ones you understand, the news that you saw or you heard is not true. It's a fake, it's not true. Then all the different emotion that arises on the basis of believing that is true will subside, will be gone away. And same thing, this ignorance, this fundamental ignorance is giving all this fake news, saying all these objects are truly existence. And then our mind believes that all these objects are truly existence. On the basis of belief that all these objects are truly inherently existing, or existence from its own objective side, as the ignorance provide us that kind of unreal, mistaken, fake news, and we believe that is the truth, and on the basis of all, once we are able to expose that the information provided by that ignorance totally mistaken, totally wrong, fake, then all these other emotion that arises on the basis of that will subside, will be, and the way to expose that ignorance is through the wisdom, through the truth of the wisdom, realizing the emptiness, the selflessness. Through the correct realization, understanding of the right view of emptiness or selflessness, then it will be able to show clearly how that ignorance is mistaken, and the information given by that ignorance is completely mistaken. and how the information given by the ignorance is not the truth. And once that has been exposed and realized, then, then delusion will no more arises. So that is so I think how it is taught by the glorious Chandrakirti. Again, Chandrakirti also taught, all the afflictive emotions such as attachments, anger, so forth, all those, and all the faults, the suffering, the result of such delusions, such as, birth, aging, sickness, and death, are seen to be arising from the apprehension of self. It arises from that fundamental ignorance, as we have already discussed many times. And once we understand that, that all this suffering we experience are result of our own afflictive emotions, and how all our afflictive emotions is a result of our self-grasping ignorance. Once we realize that, when we understand that, then the wish or the desire or inspirations to abandon and to overcome that's a fundamental ignorance, self-grasping ignorance will arise, And when that arises in our mind, then the practitioner, the yogi, will, through meditation, reflection, contemplation, try to negate the object of, through reasoning, logic, reflecting, contemplating, meditation, will try to overcome the object of that self-grasping ignorance, and that is truly existing, inherently existing self. And through that reasoning, logic, and meditation, then we prove to know that grasping truly or inherently existing self is totally wrong, totally mistaken. That is not how that is not how things of self really exist. And then by that, then the ignorance will be totally exposed, And through that, then we can, that is how the yogi try to reduce and overcome the fundamental self-grasping ignorance. So that is, and that is where I think we did already talk about that coming to the middle way, where it clearly and I already said before, I know in that verses at the last two kind of that once your mind has seen all afflictions and fault arise from the view of down-story collection, which Lama Tsongkhapa already explained, and we just talk about that. And then a yogi knows self to be its object. And I already here the self to be object is the self that exists. Okay, this third line when it says a yogi knows the self to be its object is talking about the self that exists conventionally, okay. because, and then the last line, and perform the negation of the self. And that self that is being negated is the self that does not exist, but our ignorance project or superimpose or believe to exist. That is a truly existence self. So you can see there is two self, the self to be its objects. That is the self that exists. And then the second, perform the negation of the self. That means the self that is to be negated, and that is the one which does not exist, but our ignorance project or grasp to exist. So I think and so then also Nagarjuna in his 60th stanza of reasoning, it says, that is the cause of all the view. So that means that the fundamental ignorance, the self-grasping ignorance, is the cause of all the views, wrong views. And without all these wrong views, without it, afflictions do not arise. Without all these wrong views, then there wouldn't be afflicting emotions such as attachment, anger, jealousy, pride. All others' delusion will not arise. And therefore, if you truly know this, view and afflictions are truly cleansed, then if you really know that, then we will put effort into overcoming those wrong views and those afflicting emotions. And through that, we can abandon and we can overcome that. And how can we do that? How can we overcome those wrong view and those afflictive emotions? When you wonder how this is known, how it can be done, by seeing dependent originations, that things born dependently are unborn. That was taught by the Supreme Omniscience. So it means, by seeing the emptiness, and by seeing the emptiness in the meaning of dependent arising, or dependent originations. By seeing the emptiness as a meaning of dependent origination, and understanding and seeing dependent origination as a meaning of emptiness. And when you understand that, when you have realization of that emptiness and dependent originations, then through that you can overcome the delusion by seeing that middle way, the middle way, When you really have correct understanding of middle way, unmistaken emptiness, when we have correct understanding of emptiness correctly, then we will not fall in any of the extreme. If we don't have correct understanding of emptiness, then even though we feel we might have understood emptiness, we might be falling in one of the extreme. Sometimes you hear, people saying, "Oh, I feel like there's nothing, everything, there's nothing, There's no me, there's no others, there's no good, there's no bad." It's total sense of nothingness. And that, when we have that, when there is sense of feeling there's nothing at all, it is not a correct understanding of emptiness, because you are rejecting the dependent arising. Therefore, as Lama Tsongkhapa said, when you have correct understanding on emptiness, your convictions towards the karma increase more. because you see, due to how dependent because you understand dependent arising, and because of dependent arising, due to certain cause and conditions, it gives rise to certain experience, suffering. Due to certain cause and condition, it gives rise to certain experience, happiness of oneself and others. And through that understanding, then your conviction to the karma increases. On the other hand, when you started to think, oh, there's no moral, immoral, there's no good, there's no bad, there's nothing at all, then you are rejecting the dependent origination, the dependent arising. And so that means our understanding of emptiness has kind of gone off. It is not a correct, unmistaken understanding. And so in order to have the unmistaken, correct understanding of emptiness, when we have that, while you see the emptiness, at the same time you see dependent origination. While you see dependent origination, at the same time you see emptiness. And because you see emptiness, you don't get attached and angry to the objects. Because you see dependent arising, you don't reject, there is nothing at all. And therefore, you don't reject the function of cause and effect. You don't reject the law of cause and effect. And so therefore, you wouldn't say, there's no point of becoming moral and immoral. I don't need to be moral or ethical. Because if I'm becoming ethical, that means I have dualistic view. That means I'm not understanding emptiness. Do you get it? So in order for me to have a direct understanding on emptiness correctly, that means I shouldn't have any view of ethical or unethical. And therefore, I shouldn't practice ethical or unethical. That kind of view is going one extreme. And so that is because when you don't have dependent understanding of dependent originations, the meaning of emptiness in that way, then that there is danger of that. There's danger of that. But when you understand the emptiness in the sense of dependent origination, in the term of dependent originations, then you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't fall to that extreme. So that things burn or arise depending on other cause conditions, other factors, other conditions are unborn or unarise, unproduced, meaning, they are not inherently or independently produced or born, and and that was taught by the Supreme Omniscient Buddha. And therefore, the reasoning of dependent arising is known as the king of all the reasonings. The king of all the reasonings. Some of the other reasonings help us to negate the grasping of truly existence or inherently existence, existing from its own side, but by itself doesn't immediately help us to see the dependent arisings. Whereas the reasoning of dependent arising, it cuts both extreme at the same time, because it's dependent arising or dependent originations. So because it is dependent arising, it exists by dependent. When you say something exists by dependent arisings, it clearly shows that it does not exist independently or inherently. So it clears and cut the extreme of extreme of internalisms, where we believe there's a independent existence or inherent existence. By saying dependent arising, dependent originations, it clearly shows by that, depending on certain other factors. By saying that, then so it says that object, that existence is not independently existent, not inherent existence. But because it exists by depending arising, by dependent origination, by dependent arising, then also it knows that it clears the extreme of nihilism, where it said there's nothing. If there's nothing, then we don't talk about existing by depending on some other factors. We don't have to say it's nothing exists, so therefore that is how it helped to clear the both extreme together. So therefore that reasoning, that logic is known as the king of all the reasoning and logics, and so most powerful reasoning, logic, and in our meditations, to not to fall in one of the extremes, and to have the middle understanding, the correct understanding of the emptiness, the middle way. So then the 400 Aradhamma stanza, as well as the Lama Tsongkhapa explanations, again here, and we already talked about the true self before, about where was that? Also in the middle way commentary, where they was talking the self to be its object and negation of self. Similarly here, it has similar meanings here, there's the self, observed self that exists conventionally, but that lack inherently existing self, but ignorance grasps that. That is the self to be negated. And so when that self is negated, then the root of the existence, the ignorance, is cut, when it is established, there's no truly existing self through reasoning and logic. There's no independent existing self. Then there's no object of the ignorance. And so therefore the ignorance, there's no object for the ignorance to apprehend or grasp. Once that object has been negated, refuted, then there's no objects for the ignorance to cling on, grasp on, and therefore the ignorance is cut. It's like my hand is hanging on this cup. Once this cup has been taken away or break down, there's no hand that is holding the cup, because there's no more cup. Do you get it? Once the cup is taken away, which my hand is holding at the moment. So once the cup is no more there, taken away, then there is no hand that is holding the cup. There is the hand which is holding the cup because there is a cup to be held on. And there is ignorance which is grasping truly existing self, because there is an object for that ignorance to hold on, grasp on, apprehend on. That is its object. Once that object is taken away, that has been rooted, negated through reasoning, logic, and all that. There is no mind, the ignorance that's grasping it, apprehending it. And same Shantideva also said, taught accordingly similarly, and also in the Noble Sutra of Tathagata's Secret, also it says, when the root of the tree is cut, then all the branches, leaves, and twigs, and flowers, fruit, whatever that all of them will dry up. All of them will dry up, And the same way, when the view of down-story collections, the fundamental ignorance, self-grasping ignorance, when that has been pacified, abandoned, eliminated, then all the branches of mental affliction, mental afflictive emotions, and secondary afflictive emotions are fully pacified, fully abandoned. So the 6 root mental afflictions and 21 secondary afflictive emotions, all of them will cease once we abandon the very root of all those delusions. That is that fundamental ignorance, whether we call it, fundamental ignorance, self-grasping ignorance, And I think next, I think we already kind of, you can read yourself, I think we kind of did discuss the meaning of that in all of that. Now, basically, again, I think is kind of, is saying that through cultivating the realization of persons as an emptiness, the emptiness of inherent establishments. So when we say emptiness, we are talking about inherently existing persons. And then the view of down-story collections is reversed or is overcome. And once that down-story collection of fundamental ignorance is reversed, then all other mental affliction that rely on, that arises due to that, will also be reversed and overcome. On the other hand, without the object of apprehension of self, of the persons, have been negated, if we don't, without negating that inherent existing self that's apprehended by that, the view of down-story or fundamental ignorance, then realization of selfness is impossible. The realizations of selflessness or emptiness impossible without negating that object, the inherent existing self or independent existing self. So again, as he says, in the sutras, point the view of down-story collection the root of all other mental afflictions, if you have a different meaning from the ignorance, there will be two discordant root of cyclic existence, and there is no two different discordant root. Therefore, it should be understood as ignorance. And so, therefore, the view of the transcendental collection is not separate from ignorance, but it is a ignorance itself is ignorance. And so, therefore, self-grasping ignorance. And so, I think seems again, Lama Tsongkhapa's, as we see, repeating again and again of that by relying on many different authentic sources. So I guess maybe that is all. Maybe we'll stop here for today. And I think the exercise, I think for this is, I think we did learn, we do study a lot from scriptures, how the different delusion arises from that fundamental ignorance. But I think in order to really understand deeply, it's important to really check our own emotions when we get angry, when we get upset, when we get fear, when we get agitation, frustration, impatience, whatever those different states of negative state of mind, afflictive emotion, realizing why we are getting that, how does that arise, why does it arise, and see, does it really arises because of that ignorance? Does it really arises? And how does that object appear to us? How does our mind apprehend that objects? And is those negative emotions arising because of that kind of apprehending the object that way? So then we can really learn on much more deeper level. So then it's not just information, but with our own direct experience, we kind of prove with our own direct experience how those, as is taught in all these teachings, how it is really true. And then your understanding will be unmovable, unshaken, Otherwise, when someone says something, your mind again, oh, maybe it's not, or maybe this and that, our mind is not very, our certainty, conviction is not so strong, because it's just through learning from the scriptures. It's not learning from our own experience. We rely on the scriptures like the mirror, and then we really kind of reflect on ourselves and our emotions, and then see whether how negative emotion arises. And once we are able to see with our own experience, then such conviction, such understanding will be extremely profound and deep and really transformative and unshakable, Otherwise, our understanding could be just very superficial, very surface, very artificial, and not so strong. So I think that is very important to really do that kind of observation, analysis. And that is meditation. When we start doing that, that is self-meditation. Whether you close your eyes or not, whether you are on cushion or not, when you started to feel disturbed by any of those emotions, trying to see where that emotions comes from, and then you can see how it's coming from, and you go deeper and deeper and more deeper and deeper, and then see, because of certain appearance of that object, certain way of that object. And that is not only just certain way, appearance, certain object, then we kind of, our ignorance, our mind believe that appearance. And on the basis of that belief in that appearance, then those layer of different emotions arises, and disturb and agitate us. And I think, yeah, that should be the meditation, the practice, the exercise, So thank you. And I would like to, again, thank Bob, because last time when I was asking, when John asked me the English word for prasangika, and I couldn't come, and then Bob was very kind in that. And then there are a few different things, the difference between the prasangika and sotantrika madhyamika, few difference. One of the difference is the way they use the logic. One of the reasons is the way they use the logic in order to use the logic as an inference to understand when we have misunderstanding, when we have doubt, when we don't have understanding, then using that kind of reasoning and logic to have a to overcome the doubt, to overcome the misunderstanding, and to have a correct understanding using such a reasoning and logic. And so when you're using a reasoning and logic, and then there's a two different way of the way prasangika and the way sotantrika, and so then that is one of the difference. And so the term come from that, and so, but that is not only difference they have. There are many other points of view where there is a differences. Of course, there are also a lot of similarity, and there are also differences. So the way they use logic in order to clear misunderstanding, doubt, and so forth. That is so I think so yeah, that will give you a little bit of understanding what prasangika means and what sotantrika means from the point of view of the way they use the reasoning. Okay, because this is, of course, we don't want to spend time, and because this is one of the big subject of debate in many of the scriptures, as well as in the study then when we're studying as well. Okay, dedications. Gewadi nyudo da lama sangye do gyone do wa chi gyama le ba te sa la kwe pa sho. Chancho sencho renbo che ma ke pa na ke jo che ke wa nyamba me va yang kong le kong do pe wa la sho. The wish granting, wish fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparable kindness and Gyazo, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Tu zu chang xin jang gen jia wei, ten zin zhong bei wei kun se do ko zi, xiao sun hu wei le ma tu zhu, ba da so du jie kun du xiao ten. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Good night. Thank you. Good night.